Have you ever been told you're too old to live your own life? That your only job now is to sit quietly, smile politely, and stay out of the way? That's what they told me, my own family. Just watch the house, Grandma. We'll be back in a week. They said it with those gentle smiles that aren't really gentle at all. The kind that pat you on the head while pushing you aside. It was the tone that said, "You've done your part. The rest of life isn't yours anymore." I remember standing there by the gate as their car drove away, suitcase after suitcase, packed with their laughter, their plans, their youth. I waved until they disappeared down the road, but deep inside, something inside me cracked. You see, I wasn't angry, not at first. I was just quietly erased. For years, I had taken care of that house, the same house where I raised their father, where birthdays were celebrated, where Christmas mornings smelled like cinnamon and hope. Every inch of those walls held my fingerprints, but suddenly I wasn't part of the story anymore. I was the caretaker of their memories, but not of my own life. That night, the house felt different. Still. Too still. The clocks ticked louder, the walls sighed heavier. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't just feel lonely, I felt invisible. I made myself a cup of tea and sat in the old armchair by the window. The moonlight poured in across the floorboards, touching the photos on the mantel, my wedding picture, the kids' graduation, the family trip to the lake. So many moments frozen in time, but none of them mine anymore. And as I looked around, I whispered to myself, if they think I'm too old to live, maybe I'm old enough to stop asking for permission. It's funny, isn't it, how a single sentence, "You're too old to travel," can open a door you didn't even know existed? That night, I didn't sleep, not because of sadness, but because of clarity. All those years I spent taking care of everyone, cooking, cleaning, holding the family together like thread in a frayed fabric, I never once asked what I wanted, not once. But sometimes, when you've been silent too long, life forces you to listen to your own heartbeat, to that small voice inside that says, "Enough." By morning, I knew what I had to do. I brewed my coffee, combed my hair, and picked up the phone. By noon, a real estate agent was standing in my living room, clipboard in hand. By evening, the papers were signed. And by the time my family returned from their young people's trip, the house they left me to watch was no longer ours. But that's not the real story. The real story isn't about selling a house. It's about reclaiming a life. You see, this isn't a tale of revenge. It's a story about awakening, about what happens when a woman who's been told she's too old finally decides she's just old enough to be free. So, if you've ever been dismissed, underestimated, or quietly forgotten, stay with me till the end. Because this story isn't just mine. It might be yours too. I wasn't always the woman who sold her house overnight. Once upon a time, I was simply Grandma, the dependable one, the one who remembered everyone's birthdays, baked pies that could calm storms, and stayed up late mending torn sleeves and broken hearts. My name is Eleanor, though hardly anyone calls me that anymore. To them, I'm just Grandma. It's funny how life works. You spend decades building yourself, dreams, identity, your little ambitions, and then one day you become a title, not a name, not a person, just Grandma. I married young, 17 to be exact. Back then, love was more about survival than fairy tales. My husband, Richard, was a kind man, steady and responsible, but not much for words. We built a life together in that house. A small 2-story home with creaky steps and a porch that smelled like lilacs every spring. That house became our world. We painted the nursery when our first son was born. We fixed the leaky roof together, laughing every time he fell off the ladder and blamed the shingles. We buried our old dog beneath the oak tree and planted roses by the fence. Every inch of that place had a story. Then life happened, slowly, like rain eroding stone. Richard passed away in his sleep one winter night. Just like that, the laughter stopped echoing in the halls. My children grew up, moved out, and started their own families. I understand. Life moves on. That's what mothers tell themselves to keep from breaking. But as the years went by, something subtle changed. The visits grew shorter. The calls came less often. Birthdays became text messages. Christmases turned into video calls, and my once bustling kitchen became quiet. Still, I kept the house spotless. I cooked Sunday dinners just in case they came. I folded towels, baked extra pies, and watered the garden. Because that's what love does. It prepares, even when no one's coming. I used to sit by the window every evening watching the road, waiting for headlights that rarely appeared. Sometimes, when loneliness crept in too loud, I'd whisper to the photos on the wall. "They'll come soon," I'd say. "They're just busy." But deep down, I knew the truth. I was slowly fading into the background of their lives, a familiar shadow in the family photo, a voice they remembered when convenient. There were small signs, of course, things you notice only when your heart has been quiet too long. Like the time my eldest son, Mark, forgot to pick me up for Thanksgiving. "Sorry, Mom," he'd said over the phone. Traffic was crazy and the kids were tired. I smiled and told him it was fine, even though I'd spent the whole morning cooking for a dinner that never happened. Or the time my daughter, Clara, told me not to bother knitting sweaters anymore. "The kids prefer store-bought, Mom. Yours are too scratchy." Too scratchy? Too slow. Too much. Too old. Each word a tiny cut you don't notice until one day you're bleeding from the inside out. But I never complained. That's what good mothers do, right? We swallow our pain like medicine, bitter but necessary. We tell ourselves they'll understand when they're older, when their children do the same to them. Still, there was one part of me that refused to shrink, the part that loved that house. It wasn't just wood and nails. It was memory. It was an identity. Every floorboard carried the sound of my children's laughter. Every creak on the staircase whispered, "You were here. You mattered once." That house was my last piece of belonging, the only place where I still felt seen. And that's what made what happened next so hard to swallow. It was a Thursday evening when Clara and her husband Tom came by unexpectedly. I remember wiping my hands on a dish towel and smiling when I saw them on the porch. Visits had become rare, so my heart leapt a little. I made tea, sliced pie, and set the table just the way they liked it. But as soon as they sat down, I felt it. That strange heaviness that fills a room before bad news. "Mom," Clara began, exchanging glances with Tom, "we need to talk." Now, when someone says those words after 40 years of raising them, your heart tightens. "We've been planning a family trip," she continued, her voice careful. "Just a little getaway. The kids, Tom, me, maybe even Mark's family if they can join." "That sounds lovely," I said, genuinely happy. "Where to?" "Europe," she said, eyes bright. "A whole month. Can you believe it?" I smiled. "Oh, that's wonderful, sweetheart. You've worked so hard. You deserve it." She hesitated. "Well, actually, we wanted to ask if you could do us a favor while we're gone." "Of course," I said, without thinking. "Anything." Tom cleared his throat. "We need someone to watch the house. The deliveries, the mail, the garden. You know how things pile up when we're gone." I blinked. "You mean you want me to stay here?" "Yes," Clara said quickly. "You're so good at keeping things organized, and honestly, it'll be nice for you.
You'll have some company, a change of scenery." I wanted to laugh. Company in an empty house? But I just nodded. "All right," I said quietly, "if that's what you need." Her smile widened, relieved almost. "Thank you, Mom. You're the best. We'll leave the keys and some groceries for you." And just like that, the conversation was over. They didn't ask if I wanted to go. They didn't say, "Come with us," not even as a polite gesture. I suppose in their minds I was too old for adventure, too slow for sightseeing, too fragile for fun. That night, after they left, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself. Really looked.
The woman staring back wasn't just old. She was forgotten. Her eyes still had life, but no one saw it anymore. Her hands were strong, but treated like relics. And that's when something inside me whispered, almost daringly, "What if you stopped waiting to be invited?" I brushed the thought away at first. It sounded foolish. I was 72. What did I know about starting over? But the more I tried to ignore it, the louder it grew. For the next few days, I busied myself preparing to watch their house. I watered their plants, cleaned their kitchen, even fluffed the pillows. But every chore felt hollow, as if I were tidying a cage I didn't belong in. The night before they left, Clara hugged me tight. "Thank you, Mom. We couldn't do this without you." I smiled, but my chest ached. "You could," I thought. "You just didn't want me there." When morning came, they loaded the car, their laughter spilling down the driveway. I stood at the door, clutching my cup of tea, waving as the tires crunched against gravel. Just before they turned the corner, I heard Clara call out, "Don't forget to lock up, Grandma!" And as their car disappeared from view, the words echoed in the empty air like a verdict. Too old to travel, just watch the house. The house. Their house. But that night, lying in the guest bed surrounded by someone else's life, a wild thought rooted itself in my mind, small, sharp, and unstoppable. What if I didn't just watch the house? What if I finally did something for me? And that was the last night I went to bed as the woman they thought they knew. Because by morning, everything would change. The morning after they left was unusually quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that hums with absence. I could hear the ticking of the kitchen clock, the faint hum of the refrigerator, even my own breathing. It was strange how silence could feel so loud when no one expected anything from you. I stood in their kitchen, staring at the note Clara had left on the counter. It said, "Thanks again, Mom. There's food in the fridge. Don't overexert yourself. Love you." There it was again, that word, overexert. I laughed softly. It sounded like a warning label, as if love itself came with side effects for people my age. I poured myself some tea and sat by the window. The sunlight hit the tiles just right, revealing faint smudges from little hands, my grandchildren's. They'd probably been running around, packing for their trip, leaving traces of joy I wasn't invited to share. I stared at those marks for a long time. Funny how something so small could sting so deep. That house, their house, was beautiful, modern, and utterly soulless. Everything looked perfect, sterile, curated. It smelled like lavender candles and faint regret. And I couldn't help but think how different it was from the home I once kept. My home was alive. You could smell cinnamon in the air, hear laughter through thin walls, and find love in every corner. Not the tidy, Instagram kind of love, but the messy, loud, real kind. The one that stains and stays. Now I was surrounded by walls that didn't know me, furniture that held no memories, a guest in my daughter's world. And yet, for the first time, I wasn't sad about it. I was curious, because something had shifted in me the night before. All my life, I'd done what was expected. I'd been the caretaker, the listener, the glue that kept everyone from falling apart. But somewhere along the line, I forgot to take care of me. And now, sitting in that spotless kitchen, I began to wonder, what if this loneliness wasn't a punishment, but an invitation? I looked around the room, at the shiny appliances, the spotless counters, the way everything seemed designed for beauty, but not for living. The house reminded me of Clara, perfect on the outside, quietly cracking inside. I thought of how she used to cling to me when she was little, afraid of thunderstorms. I'd hold her close and whisper, "You're safe, sweetheart. I'm here." Now, decades later, I was the one left trembling through storms, and she was nowhere near. I couldn't blame her. Life had swallowed her whole. Marriage, children, work. I had raised her to be strong, independent, and capable. Maybe I'd done my job too well. Still, I couldn't shake the ache, that small, gnawing truth that I had poured so much of myself into everyone else that there was hardly anything left for me. I spent the morning wandering through their house. I looked at family photos, smiling faces, vacations, Christmas mornings, and in none of them was I in the frame. Oh, I was probably there somewhere, behind the camera, washing dishes, tidying the mess afterward, always behind. There was one photo in particular that stopped me cold, Clara's wedding day. I remember how radiant she looked, how proud I felt walking her down the aisle. But in the picture, I was just a background blur, half smiling, half forgotten. For years, I thought that was love, giving until there was nothing left to give. But love, I've learned, shouldn't erase you. I walked upstairs and peeked into the children's rooms. Their toys, books, clothes, all neatly arranged, untouched now that they were gone. It reminded me of my own childhood, long before marriage and motherhood, when I'd sneak outside just to feel the wind on my face. That little girl was still somewhere inside me, quiet, patient, waiting for permission to breathe again. I sat on the edge of the bed and let my thoughts wander back, way back, to the first time I realized life had changed. It was after Richard died. Everyone came to comfort me for a few weeks, bringing casseroles and flowers, but eventually they went back to their lives. And I went back to silence. The days blurred together. The smell of old coffee, the ticking of clocks, the sound of my own footsteps echoing in rooms that used to be full. Then came the day Clara told me to downsize. She said, "Mom, you don't need such a big house anymore. It's just you now." Just me. 2 words that cut deeper than any insult. I almost agreed back then, but something inside me refused. That house, my home, was the last piece of my story that still belonged entirely to me. It held my love, my loss, my laughter. Every stain on the carpet, every nick in the wall told a truth my children had long forgotten. And so I stayed, stubbornly, quietly, lovingly, in that old house, as if protecting it meant protecting what was left of myself. But now, sitting here in Clara's modern home, something dawned on me. Maybe the house wasn't just a symbol of safety. Maybe it was a mirror of who I'd become, someone stuck guarding old walls instead of building new ones. The thought scared me, yet it thrilled me because it meant I wasn't done yet.
Later that afternoon, I took a walk outside. The air was crisp, the sky soft with spring. The street was lined with houses that looked identical. Manicured lawns, clean fences, not a leaf out of place. It was beautiful, yes, but lifeless. I walked slowly, my cane tapping the sidewalk, and thought about freedom. Not the kind people talk about in books or movies, but real freedom. The kind that lets you breathe without asking permission. For years, I had mistaken safety for love. I stayed quiet because I thought it was noble. I endured because I thought it was strength. But sitting alone in my daughter's perfect house, I realized silence isn't always strength. Sometimes it's surrender. I thought about the word old, how people say it like a sentence, not a stage. Too old to travel, too old to learn, too old to matter. Yet here I was, 72, still capable of feeling everything. Grief, anger, joy, even the thrill of rebellion whispering at the edge of my heart. I realized something then. Growing old doesn't make you invisible. People just stop looking closely. That night, I made tea again, the way I always do when I'm about to make a decision. Steam rose from the cup, curling like memories in the air. And I whispered, what if I didn't just wait anymore? I didn't know exactly what I meant yet, but I could feel it, that restless spark beneath my ribs, that hunger for something more. Freedom, dignity, self-respect, words I hadn't thought about in years. I walked into the living room and looked at the family portrait above the fireplace. There they were, Clara, her husband, the kids, all smiling in perfect harmony, and yet something about it felt hollow. I took the photo down, gently, and placed it face down on the table. Then I went to my room and opened my purse. Inside, I found an old envelope, the deed to my house, the one they told me to keep safe. I ran my fingers over it and smiled. That house, my old home, wasn't just a building. It was a promise, my promise to myself. The promise that no matter how old I got, I'd never stop being me. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to remind them who I was. For the first time in a long while, I slept soundly that night. My dreams weren't haunted by loneliness anymore. They were filled with open roads, wild winds, and the scent of lilacs. And in my dream, I was young again, barefoot, laughing, running through the yard of that old house, not waiting for anyone, not asking permission, just living. When I woke up, the decision was already made. I didn't need to think about it. My heart had already chosen.
The house, my house, had one final story left to tell, and I was ready to write it. The silence in that house had changed. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was hollow, sharp, almost accusing. Every creak of the floorboards felt like a reminder of what I had become to them, a caretaker of memories no one wanted to keep. I used to walk through these rooms humming old songs, dusting photos, keeping everything as warm and alive as I could. But after they left, their laughter echoing out the door, the car pulling away without so much as a backward glance, I realized something. I was no longer part of their story. I was the footnote. That realization hit me like a cold wind. They had told me, "Just watch the house, Grandma. We'll only be gone a few weeks." Their tone had been polite, maybe even loving on the surface, but there was something else under it, that quiet, dismissive edge, the kind that says, "You're too old to be part of this world now." I smiled and nodded at the time, like I always do. That's what mothers and grandmothers are taught, isn't it? Smile, understand, don't make a fuss. But as their voices faded, the truth began to whisper. It wasn't about the trip. It wasn't about me staying behind because I was tired. It was about convenience. I had become a placeholder, someone who made their absence easier, their plans smoother, their guilt quieter. I sat by the window that night, watching the headlights disappear down the road. The house, my house, looked different at that moment. The furniture I had chosen, the curtains I had sewn with trembling fingers, even the pictures on the walls, everything seemed to belong to someone else now. They had claimed it slowly, bit by bit over the years. New furniture, new colors, their style replacing mine. I had let them, because that's what love does. It gives until it forgets what it owns. But that night, something inside me stirred, something I hadn't felt in decades. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even painful. It was awakening. For years, I'd been shrinking, quietly, like a candle burning low. I'd stopped wearing the bright shawls I used to love. I'd stopped baking the pies I was known for because, Mom, the kitchen gets too messy. I'd stopped singing to the radio because, Grandma, that music's too old. They'd silenced me with kindness, with soft tones and busy schedules, and I had accepted it because love, in its twisted, tired form, can make you blind to slow disappearances. But now, with the house echoing every breath I took, I began to see clearly. Every photo they'd replaced, every shelf they'd rearranged, every decision they'd made without me was a quiet erasure. I wasn't a person in their lives anymore. I was a backdrop. And as I sat there under the dim yellow glow of the hallway light, I realized something even more painful. They thought I'd never do anything about it. They believed I'd always wait, always watch, always forgive. It's strange how people mistake patience for weakness. They think silence means surrender, but sometimes silence is the sound of a storm building. That night, I walked into the living room and looked around like I was seeing it for the first time. My hands ran across the wooden table, the same one my husband and I had bought 40 years ago. He had built the first shelf in this house, brick by brick, while I painted the walls a soft cream to catch the morning light. Every inch of this place carried our fingerprints, not theirs, ours. And yet, they had turned it into something sterile, something theirs. It's modern now, Grandma. You should be proud. Proud. That word started to feel like a bandage they placed over every small wound they caused. I wasn't angry, not yet, but I was beginning to remember myself. The next morning, I opened the curtains wide. Sunlight poured into the room, lighting up the dust that danced in the air. I made coffee, real, strong coffee, not the tasteless machine brew they preferred. I sat in my husband's old chair and listened to the quiet of the refrigerator.
And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like the keeper of their memories. I felt like the owner of my own. I pulled out an old album, the one they'd tucked away in the attic because nobody looks at photos anymore. I flipped through each page slowly, my children's faces, younger, smiling, eyes full of dreams I had once shared. Vacations, birthdays, Sunday dinners, all the things we used to do together. Then, somewhere between those pages, it hit me, a sudden, sharp truth. They weren't cruel. They were careless. And sometimes that's worse. Carelessness doesn't see you fade. It just forgets to notice. I laughed quietly, a dry, trembling laugh that felt like both grief and freedom. They had left me to watch the house. They had no idea what kind of woman they'd left behind. The plan hadn't formed yet, but the seed had been planted. It was there, quiet, almost invisible, but alive. I started walking through each room, touching the walls, the furniture, the windows. I whispered to the house like it could hear me. We're still here, aren't we? The house creaked in response, the way old houses do. Maybe it was my imagination. Maybe it was something more. And then I smiled, really smiled, because for the first time I realized I didn't need their permission to exist. They had gone off to see the world, to live their version of adventure, but they didn't know I was about to start my own. And it would begin right here, in this house they thought they owned. That night, I didn't sleep. The moonlight spilled through the lace curtains, silver and soft, touching the corners of the room like an old friend. I sat there, still in my robe, hands wrapped around a cup of cold tea that I'd poured hours ago. Every thought circled back to one truth. I didn't belong here anymore. Not in their world, not in the space they had built around me. But the house still belonged to me. That realization filled me with a strange kind of calm. I wasn't angry, not even bitter, just certain. The next morning, I opened the drawer in my husband's desk, the one nobody ever touched. Inside were old papers, a faded photo of us on our wedding day, and the original deed to the house. My hands trembled as I touched it. I hadn't seen that paper in years, but it felt like touching a piece of my own backbone. This house, I whispered, was never just bricks and walls. It was laughter and sleepless nights and burnt toast and birthdays and 1,000 quiet mornings when life still felt endless. But now it has become something else, a cage made of sentiment. I folded the deed carefully and placed it in my purse. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew it started with reclaiming what was mine. The real estate office was colder than I remembered. The woman behind the desk looked young enough to be my granddaughter, all polished and professional, her smile quick and practiced. "Good morning," I said, voice calm but steady. "I'd like to talk about selling my house." Her pen paused midair. "Oh, are you sure, ma'am? It's a big decision."
I smiled. Yes, it is. As she typed my information, I looked out the window. Cars passed by, people hurried across the street, life moved forward, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was moving with it. We went through the process, signatures, valuations, visits. Each step felt like peeling away another layer of the past. The more I signed, the lighter I became. Not because I wanted to erase the memories, no, those were mine to keep, but because I finally stopped letting them hold me hostage. During one of the meetings, the agent softly asked, "If you don't mind me asking, why now?" I looked at her, really looked. She had that same distracted kindness my daughter often wore, the kind that hides exhaustion behind polite words. "Because," I said quietly, "for too long, I've been living like I was already gone." Her eyes softened. She didn't ask more. She just nodded. And that was enough. The final signing day came. It was early morning, the air crisp and cool, the kind that smells like change. I wore my best shawl, the deep burgundy one my late husband always loved. I even pinned my hair up like I used to in my younger days. When I arrived at the office, the papers were already laid out. The agent smiled warmly. "All we need now is your signature." I picked up the pen and for a moment my hand froze. My mind flooded with images. The laughter of my children echoing down the hall, the smell of cinnamon rolls on Sunday mornings, the sound of my husband hammering in the garden, humming off key. My throat tightened. Every inch of this house had been my life's witness. It had seen me at 20, at 40, at 70. It had held me through storms no one else knew about. And now, I was letting it go. A tear slipped down before I could stop it. I smiled through it. "Thank you," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if it was to the agent, to my husband's memory, or to the house itself. Maybe to all three. And then I signed. With one stroke of ink, the weight of 40 years lifted. When I returned home, the house felt different. Empty, yes, but lighter somehow, as if it knew its purpose had been fulfilled. I walked through each room slowly, whispering little goodbyes. In the kitchen, I touched the worn spot on the counter where I used to knead dough every weekend. "You've been good to me," I said softly. In the hallway, I stopped by the family pictures. I didn't take them down. I left them, memories frozen in their happiest form. And finally, in the living room, I stood where the sunlight poured in through the big window. I took one last deep breath. "You were never just a house," I whispered. "You were my story." I closed the door behind me and slipped the key into my pocket. It was the last time I would ever lock it. 3 days later, I got the call. The sale had gone through. The buyer had signed. Funds were cleared. It was official. That night, I booked a train ticket, not to anywhere Nancy, but to the seaside town my husband and I had once dreamed of retiring in, just a little cottage near the water, quiet, simple, freedom. When I told no one, it wasn't out of spite. It was out of peace. They had made their plans without me. Now I was simply returning the favor. The family came back 2 weeks later. I can still picture it, the sound of their laughter outside, the slam of car doors, the clatter of suitcases on the driveway. They called my name first, loud and casual. "Grandma, we're home!" I watched from across the street, sitting on a bench under an old oak tree. I had come back, just once, to see the ending with my own eyes. The laughter faded. The smiles began to drop. Confusion rippled through them as they looked at the unfamiliar car parked in the driveway, the movers carrying boxes into what they still thought was their house. My daughter ran up to the porch, trying her key. It didn't fit. She tried again. Her voice cracked. "Mom! Mom, what's going on?" The new owner stepped out, a kind woman with silver hair and gentle eyes. "Can I help you?" she asked. I couldn't hear the rest from where I sat, but I didn't need to. The realization was written all over their faces. Their home, my home, wasn't theirs anymore. I didn't stay long, just long enough to see the moment they finally looked around and realized what I had felt all those years, that sometimes the things you take for granted don't wait for you forever. As the train carried me away that evening, I watched the city fade behind me, the skyline, the streets, the memories. I felt no guilt, only clarity. For once, I wasn't the one left behind. The morning after I sold the house, I woke to a silence I hadn't felt in years. Not the hollow silence of loneliness, but the soft, sacred quiet that follows a storm. I made my tea slowly, savoring every step, every sound. The kettle's whistle, the gentle pour, the warmth in my palms, all of it felt new, like I was being reintroduced to life itself. For the first time in decades, I had no one to cook for, no chores waiting, no footsteps echoing down the hall. Just me, and a world waiting to be rediscovered. I rented a small cottage near the sea. It wasn't grand or fancy, but it was mine. The walls smelled of salt and sunlight. The window looked out onto endless blue. I spent my mornings sitting by that window, watching waves roll in like memories, each one touching the shore and disappearing, leaving behind only traces of foam. I realized people are like that too. We leave marks that fade, but we still shape the world around us. At first, I thought I'd feel regret, that I'd wake one morning aching for the sound of their voices, for the chaos of family, for the house that once held everything I loved. But regret never came. Only peace, deep, grounded peace. Sometimes I'd catch myself smiling for no reason. Maybe it was because I finally remembered what it felt like to belong to myself. You see, for years, I had mistaken sacrifice for love. I believed that giving endlessly was the only way to be needed. I stayed quiet when I should have spoken. I stayed put when I should have walked away. I told myself that motherhood meant endurance, not evolution. But I was wrong. Motherhood, womanhood, is not a vow of disappearance. It's a journey of becoming. That realization didn't come easy. It came through years of small hurts, the ignored phone calls, the forgotten birthdays, the quiet dinners where my chair at the table felt like an obligation rather than an honor. It came when they said those words, "You're too old to travel, Grandma. Just watch the house." That single sentence carried decades of dismissal. But now, standing by the sea, I understood something simple and profound. People treat you the way you teach them to. And I had spent a lifetime teaching them that my love was unconditional, no matter how little they saw me, no matter how small they made me feel. I don't blame them for that. They learned from the version of me who never said no. But it was time to show them something different. Freedom, I've learned, doesn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it comes quietly, in the way you sip your tea without rushing, in the way you stop apologizing for your joy, in the way you choose silence, not because you're afraid, but because peace is louder. I began to write again, not for anyone to read, just for me. My stories were simple, bits of memory stitched together with honesty. I wrote about my first years of marriage, when love was tender and hopeful. I wrote about the nights I stayed awake waiting for everyone to come home safely. I wrote about the times I bit my tongue to keep the family together. And then slowly, I wrote about the woman I became after I let it all go. Every page felt like a confession and a resurrection. The sea became my companion. Some mornings, I'd walk barefoot along the shore, the cold water kissing my toes, and whisper to the waves like an old friend. "Do you ever get tired of returning?" I'd ask. The waves, of course, never answered, but I think I understood. It wasn't about returning, it was about letting go and still coming back whole. Once, while watching the sunset, I thought of my granddaughter. Her laughter, her bright eyes, the way she once asked me, "Grandma, why did you sell your house?" I hadn't told her the full truth then. She was too young. But one day, she'll understand that sometimes you have to burn the bridge to see how far you can swim. I don't hate my children. I love them more now, strangely enough, but it's a different kind of love, one that doesn't erase me. I send them letters, pictures of the sea, notes that say I'm doing well. And I mean it. I am. They still sound surprised when they call. "Mom, you sound happy," my daughter said once. I smiled. "I am," I told her, and for the first time in years, I wasn't pretending. It's funny. People think growing old means fading away, but I've never felt more alive. There's something magical about reclaiming your time, your body, your space. I wake when I want. I paint seashells. I dance to old songs when no one's watching. I bake cookies and give them to strangers walking their dogs. I even took a solo trip to a nearby town, my first adventure, as my granddaughter called it. She said, "Grandma, you're brave." And maybe, finally, I am. You know what the biggest secret of aging is? It's not about losing time. It's about finally understanding what it's worth. There's a strange kind of beauty in starting over at an age when people think your story's already been written. The truth is, I'm not starting over. I'm continuing, just finally on my own terms. I think that's what freedom really means. Not rebellion, not anger, but release. The quiet kind. The kind that feels like forgiveness. Not of others, but of yourself, for waiting so long to choose you. Sometimes I wonder what they tell people now. Maybe they say I acted impulsively. Maybe they say I lost my mind. Maybe they even say I betrayed them. But that's all right. Everyone tells the story the way they need to survive it. I tell mine the way I finally lived it. Honest, unashamed, and free. And if anyone ever asks me whether I'd do it again, I'll say this, 1,000 times over. Because sometimes the best gift you can give your family is the example that your worth doesn't expire with age. When people see a woman my age, they see wrinkles, gray hair, and old habits. But beneath that, there's history. A heart that's still learning, still dreaming, still defying expectations. And if that makes me reckless, then so be it. I'd rather be reckless than invisible. As I sit by the sea each evening, watching the horizon melt into gold, I whisper a little prayer, not for more time, but for more truth. Because the truth, once found, never leaves you. And maybe that's the hidden lesson in all this. Maybe selling the house wasn't about revenge. Maybe it was about resurrection. About remembering that love doesn't mean staying. It means knowing when to walk away and trusting that life will still meet you halfway. So when they said, "You're too old to travel, Grandma," they were right about one thing. I am too old. Too old to wait, too old to settle, too old to live small, but never too old to begin again. Because the morning I sold that house, I didn't lose my home. I found my freedom. The funny thing about endings is that they rarely arrive when we expect them to. Sometimes they slip in quietly, like dawn through a half-open curtain, and before you realize it, a whole chapter of your life has turned its final page. That's how it was for me. I didn't slam any doors. I didn't scream or demand to be understood. I just closed the book and started writing a new one. And in that silence, I found something no one ever told me about growing older. That freedom isn't just for the young. It belongs to anyone brave enough to claim it. There was a time when I thought my worth came from being needed, from how much I gave, how well I endured, how quietly I carried the weight of everyone else's happiness. But standing by the sea now, I see it differently. My worth was never in what I gave away. It was in what I kept. The courage to still believe in myself when the world stopped seeing me. People love to tell older women what they can't do. You're too old to travel. You're too old to start over. You're too old to dream. But I've learned that too old is just another word for too brave. Because when you reach an age where you've lost, loved, and learned enough, you finally realize you don't need permission to live. If there's one thing I want you, the person listening right now, to take from my story, it's this. Never let anyone tell you your story is over. It isn't. The day you start believing in your own worth again, the day you choose peace over approval, that's the day your second life begins. And it doesn't matter if you're 30 or 70. Beginnings don't come with an age limit. When my family came back and found the house gone, there was chaos, anger, and disbelief. But over time, something shifted. My daughter came to visit months later. She sat across from me, eyes softer than I'd ever seen, and said, "Mom, I get it now. You weren't running away. You were finally coming home to yourself." That moment, that understanding, was worth everything. Sometimes you have to do something unthinkable to remind the world that you still exist, not out of spite, but out of love, for yourself, for the woman you used to be, and for the one you're still becoming. Because every time a woman stands up and reclaims her voice, the world shakes a little and something changes for all of us. If my story made you feel something, even a flicker of recognition, then maybe it's because part of you is standing at a similar crossroads. Maybe you've been told you're too late, too tired, or too stuck. But I'm here to tell you, it's never too late to begin again. You can pack your courage, pour yourself a cup of tea, and start with whatever small act of freedom feels right. Change doesn't have to roar. Sometimes it starts with a whisper and a key turning in a lock for the last time. So wherever you are, if your heart feels heavy, if you've been told your best years are behind you, remember this. Your story is far from over. You still have chapters left to write, laughter left to share, sunsets left to see. You still have time not to do what the world expects, but to do what makes you come alive. And if my story teaches you anything, let it be this. Never let anyone tell you you're too old to start again, because every sunrise proves that even after the darkest night, light finds its way back, and so can you. If you enjoyed this story, my dear ones, make sure to subscribe to Grandma's Silent Truths, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I read them all. Each one feels like a letter from a friend across the miles. And don't miss the next story. It's one you won't forget. Until then, remember this. Life doesn't end when they stop believing in you. It begins when you start believing in yourself again. After all, sometimes the morning you sell the house is the morning you finally come home.